Hi, welcome to Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and I'm here with my co-host today, Eliot Grossman. How are you, Eliot?
Murph, it has been a long time, and I am great.
It's been so long. We're in a totally
You look
season.
fabulous. Your hair is just wonderful. Everything looks great.
Your hair looks fabulous, too.
Oh, I got a
You
cut.
look
Thank you for
fantastic.
asking.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Yes,
appreciate
I
it.
thought so. I thought something looked different there. Well, today we're going to have a little bit of fun because I'm going off the track slightly, but only slightly, because I'm going to orient what we're going to be talking about today not only based on business, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of a twist, and we're going to be talking about some sports as well. I think you'll like that.
Yeah.
I think you can handle it. I knew that
right.
when I was selecting which show to queue up, I knew that this would be a topic that you'd really dive right into.
Yep. Great.
So the overview for this particular show is sometimes leaders forget to put pressure on themselves and think their whole team performance is fully their responsibility. It's not, but when it is, and they act like it is, serious challenges are ahead for them and their team. So I was really inspired to write this story based on an occasion relating to one of my Division I athletes. They happen to be a captain of a Division I team that will remain unnamed. Mm-hmm. And I had heard circumstantially that something had happened where they were injured and they decided to override the advice of all of their coaches, all of their trainers, anybody else that was talking to them to tell them, you should, sit this next game out. Mm-hmm. You're injured. And they decided that they knew better. Mm-hmm. And they decided that they would play. And fortunately for them, the particular game that they were playing because of weather circumstances was in a different location. And it was almost COVID-like because they only allowed a certain amount of people to come see.
Okay.
That was the upside for this particular individual because their performance wasn't, as you might imagine, as good as it could be based on this injury that they were playing on. So, I'll give them credit and say that they were playing maybe at 75% of their capability. Mm-hmm. But this individual was a captain, okay? So think about some of the actions and what that was expressing to the team in terms of an impact and what he was role modeling. Maybe perhaps some selfish role modeling, potentially. That might be a word I would potentially choose, which is unfortunate. And one of the key elements, as you know, to being a leader is really mastering the art of being unselfish. Mm-hmm. This was purely not an unselfish act, as you might imagine, right? So this also presented an opportunity to be a great learning situation post the game. Certainly I wasn't going to be talking to this individual right after the game, but there was the right time to have that conversation with them. So let's face it, leaders are under a tremendous amount of pressure, both sports coach leaders and executive leaders. And it's something that most people don't understand who haven't been in a leadership role, what kind of pressure that they're under and what they have to, deal with. So what was the first time, harken back to like when you were in a leadership role, and talk to me about what some of that pressure felt like for you and how did you manage through that?
Yeah, so I think the most important thing, or the first thing to realize is, and this is such a, I guess, cliche, but there's no I in team.
That's right.
But there's an M and an E.
That is, some people think. Yes.
And so that individual you're talking about put himself or herself ahead of the team.
That's right.
You equate that to, and you can't do that, right? And it is our job as coaches, or it's our job as managers, to be able to kind of stop or put a hold on whatever their, what's the word I'm looking for? Agenda? Maybe,
I like
right? Because that person had an agenda.
That's true. They did.
They were trying. I get it. I'm sure there was good thoughts, and there was thought they were doing the right thing, but in essence, they could have sat out the game, had another player be at 100%. It's no different in the managerial world, right? It's our job as managers in the business world to say, hey, we can't sit you down, but it's our job to say, okay, now as a leader, the pressures are quite different. right? It's not only my responsibility to oversee everything, but it's my responsibility, and I feel it responsible to their livelihood, their family's livelihood.
Absolutely.
All of those things come into play when you're a manager.
That's right.
And so the pressures are different, whether it's the business world or the sports world, but it's still pressure, right? So where do you when was the first time you felt pressure, right? We worked together years ago, but we didn't really feel the pressure as much in our roles.
No.
To get things done, we got things done. We had a lot of people around us and good teams. But in your leadership role, how did you feel it? Like, what was the first time?
Well, it's interesting. So thinking back to when we worked together, I was probably at least a decade older than the first time when I recall thinking for the first time, okay, now I'm in a leadership role and I'm feeling this pressure. And I'll never forget this because I was in a situation where we were planning the strategy for the following year, and there were a lot of moving parts. I hadn't really done aspects of the role before. I was a newly minted leader, if you will. And I remember saying to somebody, I'm not sure if I know what I'm doing, and I'm not sure who to ask. And they said, well, you're the leader. You're going to just have to figure this out, whatever that meant.
It's always figure it out.
Right, exactly. And I have a friend who loves to use the expression, everything's figure-outable. And so I didn't know that expression at the time, but I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is so much pressure, because now the spotlight was on me, and if I didn't get this right or make some of the right decisions, what was the outcome going to be? And I knew that it was going to impact others negatively if I didn't get this right, to your point, their livelihood potentially.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I appreciated, luckily it wasn't, I knew it wasn't completely all on me. There were other people that were also in leadership roles, so I understood the spread of that leadership. But I'll never forget that day when that person said to me, this is all on you. You need to figure it out. You're the leader now.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the pressure going into the leadership role and then moving up a level, right, into I wouldn't say executive role, but a higher level of management, mid-management, even into senior management. It was learning how to, you're hearing a lot of squawking, a lot of complaining, a lot of questioning from the team, not about you in particular, but about the senior level, right? The C-level folks, right?
Oh, yes.
And the executive level folks. And for me, the hardest part of that leadership was managing up. Managing down is easy because you were once one of them. You never forget where you came from as a manager and a coach in the sports world. You never forget you were once a player. Times change, people change, how we deal with certain individuals and how we deal with situations are quite different. But in the business world, to be able to manage up was a really hard thing. That's the pressure I felt like, oh, holy crap, am I going to say something that's going to jeopardize my job?
Right, exactly.
And then put my team, who now relies on me for leadership, put them in a challenging situation, because if a new manager comes in, do they start making changes right away?
Then what? Exactly.
Yeah, then what, right?
I was having an interesting conversation recently with a individual who's in the academic world, a very high level position. And we were talking about different rules that they have to abide by in that industry, if you will. And I said, well, if those rules don't serve you well, aren't there opportunities for you to go about and maybe make some changes to them? And he said, no, there really aren't, because there are unions that control our scenario. So I said, well, how do you circumnavigate and handle getting anything done in that scenario? And this person said to me, it's all about having influence, and that applies to the managing up aspect also. No, we don't necessarily get taught that per se in terms of that exact circumstance.
Well, that's what did your friend say to you? It's
figure-outable.
Well, that's all figure-outable, right?
It is.
Like, okay, how do I leverage? And we use that, right? Like, how do you leverage? For me, it was like, okay, how do I figure out the personal relationship part and the professional, and how do I use that to leverage something that's going to not only benefit me, but it benefit my team.
And I like
So for you, go ahead. Yeah.
the word relationship is the key. Because how can you have any influence over anybody if there's no relationship there? Do you think that they're going to listen to you? Probably not, right?
Of course not.
So it means fostering a relationship with that person or a collection of people in order to have influence at some point. But
Well, let me stop you for a second, because I bet
Yeah.
you talk to, whether you're on the business side of your sports teams, you meet with players
Yes.
and coaches individually.
yes,
And what you hear is quite different from
Very.
each one, right? So
That's right.
how do you take what you're hearing from the players, and it might be 10 players, 10 different situations,
Sure.
and use that to help maybe, in your situation, make the coach aware of it without kind of ratting out the players.
Right.
And leverage that relationship and trust with the players to bring to the managerial side of things.
So that's a great question, and I have to do that on a regular basis.
Right.
As a matter of fact, there was a situation that happened with one of my sports teams last week that I wasn't aware of until the coach brought it to my attention. Now, had this been last season, that particular group of student athletes probably would have said something to me because they wouldn't have known how to handle the situation. But in the situation that you were describing, in terms of how do I take confidential information and package it back up to be able to maintain the relationships that I have with those student athletes and then bring that to the coach very carefully. And I also leverage the opportunity, typically as another teaching situation, because there was obviously something that was missing along the line in terms of the telephone game where that information didn't get passed along to that coach to understood maybe the repercussions or why the way that they handled it may not have been the best way and how it impacted the team. Because they don't always see that because the team was afraid to say anything to the coach for the reasons that you cited.
And so they had some trust in you. Some players had trust in the coach. Relationships are different with the coaches for each player.
Right.
And I'm sure for you, then it's about the communication, right? How do you communicate
100%.
with the coach? And I know, Murf, that you probably have some tips.
I
that
do.
you're gonna give us about communicating.
I do have some tips. And here's the other thing that's quite beautiful about what we're just talking about as well, is the fact that it really comes down to a couple different things. It is communication is one of them, and I will sort of go into the tips section. But it's also about, what kind of body language, what kind of advice, what kind of motivation are you casting towards somebody in terms of that scenario. And these are things that don't always get considered in the framework of what we're talking about. But I'm gonna give some examples in terms of helping some people out in this area.
Some tips to
I
help
know,
out.
right? Exactly. So my first tip is to look around the next time you're with the team that you lead, and that's obviously a business team or a sports team. Consider how hard all of them are working and how much they depend on you to make good decisions. Don't let them down by making selfish decisions, which will negatively impact and affect you and likely them. Another one is you are always being watched, especially in this day and age with so many cameras. My brother-in-law works for a company. That's their job, is to put these kind of hidden cameras in everywhere, so everybody's being watched, whether we like it or not. And I don't like to sometimes know that much about it because I just don't want to think about it.
Big Brother is everywhere.
They are.
Yeah.
Exactly. So never forget this. So exhibit your best behavior at all times. That would be favorable to you if, in fact, that this behavior gets played back at some point in time, because perhaps you don't want to see that or deal with the repercussions from it on any given day.
That's interesting, right? Because whether it's the athletic director that hired this coach, or the vice president or CEO hires the vice president of sales, is it really that hard to be on your best behavior, right? People make a big deal about that. And I don't want to get
funny you should say
sidetracked
that.
here, but I don't think it's really that hard. You're a good person. you should be the same person you were when you interviewed, then when you manage your team or coaching. Just be who you are, and you don't have to worry about exhibiting your best behavior. Your best behavior should be from the time you get up, from the time you go to bed.
I agree, but there is an exception from time to time, and sometimes that exception comes in the form of the emotions getting the best of you.
Yep.
So independent of how much you can contain yourself and sort of have yourself on your best behavior all the time, sometimes those emotions will override
Sure, absolutely.
that. And that's unfortunate, and that's sometimes when we get into
Right on,
trouble.
right
So
on.
how do you deal with the mitigating that, and then the cleanup from that circumstance occurring, right?
Right,
That's
right,
a little.
for
That's
sure.
where the tricky part is. Another example is to get comfortable with asking for advice. So in this particular situation where this particular individual may have lost their emotions got the best of them and they lost their composure, they probably could have asked for some advice prior to doing what they did.
Yep.
And it may not have occurred, if you will. So don't ever think that you have all the answers or have to have all the answers. So what about you?
Well, I laugh at that. I'm smiling because, many times when we work together, we've said this on, a lot of shows we've done together. Murph, can we go take a walk? And you'd say,
Right.
E, let's go take a walk. And we walk around the building and we would take a deep breath and say all the dumb things that we want to say about some of the senior management, whatever might be going on.
Absolutely.
And then you go back in and you smile and you try to figure out a way how to leverage
Yes.
that relationship.
That's right.
And how it's going to work, not only for you, but for the team. So anyway, you want to ask about some suggestions and ideas on how,
Yeah.
that's a tough one, Murph, right? Because 10 players, 10 personalities, 10 thoughts and ideas. For me, and I've said this a million times in this, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth.
That is right.
And I do a really poor job. Sometimes I talk way too much and don't listen enough. But if we listen as senior managers, as coaches, as vice presidents, whatever we do, if you listen, you really don't ever have to talk because you understand what some of these challenges that are being faced. And then it's our job to dissect that information, compile it all together and say, okay, how do I then make it the best for these people? And I think as players, captains can pull all that information together and go to the head coach. The captain should have a pulse on
Yes.
what's going on with the team and
They
be able
usually
to
do.
relay that information and leverage a relationship with the coach.
Yep.
Hopefully it's good.
Right.
In the professional world, it's no different. It's my job to have the pulse on what's happening with my team, our team. I'm not a my guy, it's an our team. Mm-hmm. But it is my job to go ahead and manage up and let them know where some of
That's
the
right.
challenges are.
That's right,
So I
exactly.
think, again, it sounds silly. It's about listening and then communicating.
Absolutely.
And as you said, don't do it emotionally.
And that's difficult. It's hard sometimes to take the emotion out of circumstances that are emotional situations.
Correct.
You do the best that you can in those circumstances.
I
and
mean,
it's
what about
not
you?
easy.
I mean, there's got to be other suggestions that you have.
I do, as a matter of fact, have some other suggestions.
Weird. It's almost like we have a script.
I know. Imagine that.
Yeah.
So continue to invest in yourself in terms of learning more about who you truly are. I think self-awareness is one of the most critical aspects of leadership. And when I'm working with my clients that are working with me to further develop their leadership capacity, the first thing that we work on is having them understand better themselves. Because I always say to them, if you don't understand yourself supremely well, how do you expect to be able to be a good leader and to be able to leverage your strengths with those that you lead? And the answer is they really can't, and they're not going to do it effectively.
And it's amazing. It's
right?
like the simplest of things, but yet
Understand who
happen.
you are.
Yeah.
Exactly. And don't ever think that you've got it all sort of understood and that you can't always be sort of leveling up, independent of whether that's in business or in the sports world, right? Mm-hmm. Always take that opportunity to seek out new ways to do things and to test. Another one is to practice putting your team's needs into greater focus Ask your team questions and really listen. To your point earlier, you've got the proportion going on of the 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it accordingly, and I've said that before. More importantly, what they might be telling you, not telling you, is what you should also be listening for, because that's going to be critical. So are they not asking you questions when you're giving them an opportunity to tell me more about the situation in terms of how we could improve it? And they don't give you much to work with, say, for example, and you know that they should be asking a few more questions.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's all part of, with our teams, it's as much as everybody says, God, I hate to do one-on-ones or individual
Sure.
meetings.
Right.
I believe that the captain should be individually meeting with their teammates.
Yes. Yes.
30 seconds, 5 minutes,
Right.
whatever it takes
Right.
to hear. I also believe that we as managers and senior managers, it's so vitally important for us to just do one-on-ones.
Yes.
How's life? What are the challenges you're facing professionally? Because people want to talk.
They do.
And maybe I'm facing challenges at home that we are unaware of.
That's right.
And so we got to build all of that up.
Right.
And when I go to manage that up and they say, you know, hey, Mr. CEO, or hey, Mr. Senior VP or Miss Senior VP, the reason that Kathy is not performing right now is because of this, this, and this.
Right.
You never know what people are dealing with,
You
Murf,
don't.
until you talk.
That's right.
And communicate. And again, we've talked about leverage in relationships.
Yep.
Well, we have to leverage that relationship so they trust us.
That's right.
And,
That's
and
right.
That's you know, for me, it's a pretty simple thing.
And with the relationship that I have with my clients, whether it's on the corporate business side or the sports teams, I cannot breach and break that confidence level that they have in me, in
Absolutely.
terms of keeping my word, in terms of not conveying something that was privately discussed. I can never go there. So it's like that client consultant sort of arrangement that's
Right,
understood,
right.
the privileged sort of information there. So another example would be, what is your trust level that you, and how would you rate yourself in terms of the leader? And can people 100% count on you? Or are you sort of at the, below 100% mark?
Right.
And if you are below 100%, sometimes that happens. But you want to do your best to try to get back to that level, if you will. And there's plenty of opportunity to bring that level up, and people will forgive. It's a matter of how egregious was this situation, and you can make minor gaffes.
I think those are teachable moments.
Yes.
Right, and they're learned experiences.
Yes.
So again, as we get a little bit older and as we've been in management longer or whatever it may be, you have to learn these things. We're not going to be the hothead you might have been as a young manager.
That's right.
And you have a lot more wisdom to bring. So I agree with you 1,000%.
And I like this particular thought as well. Just ask somebody that's been on a championship team whether they trust their coach or their teammates. Right? I bet you 100% the answer is 1,000,000%.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Or vice versa. I know we get a role here, but you're on a losing team.
Yep.
If you get that answer like I trust everybody implicitly, that's amazing.
Right.
That means the captain and the coaches did a great job, sales teams, whatever it might be, did a great job.
That's right.
Doesn't happen often.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Do you have any other advice that you might give to leaders, newer leaders, maybe leaders that have even been around the block a few times?
Yeah, pressure is what you make of it, right? And everybody gets so
Yes.
worked up and wound up, and we live in this crazy world that everybody's got to work 24/7. Number one, when the day is done, you have to make it done.
Yes.
Don't work till 9 o'clock.
No.
Don't work till 10 o'clock.
It's going to be there.
It's going to be there.
Unless you work in an emergency room.
Then it's a little different animal,
It's
right?
24/7.
But however, just take a deep breath. Think what would be good, what would be bad. Put yourself in that situation, because quite honestly, the pressure mainly comes from inside.
It 100%.
It does not come from everybody on the outside. Senior management, if they're in an executive level position, they're pretty good at not being, if they're the right people in the right roles, they're pretty good at not letting it roll downhill and hammer you about many situations.
They certainly are. They certainly are.
Final thoughts on your end, Murf?
I would say, embrace the responsibility of being a leader, enjoy the journey, and don't take yourself too seriously. I think too many leaders and sports coaches just get so caught up in the persona of the brand that they've created, and that they can't have any fun, and that it's got to be all serious 100% of the time. And you got to have some fun rolled in. You really do. I just don't think anybody benefits from everything being serious all the time. Granted, there are situations in industries that are serious, right?
Of course.
When you're playing at a competitive level, at the pro level or at the Olympic level, right, there's money at stake. So it's a little bit of a different pressure there. But it doesn't mean that you still can't have some fun.
There's a lot of money at stake at work on the business level.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
We work together, I do now, I try to laugh. We're not that big of a deal.
No.
I'm not that important. I'm just fortunate to have a position that I'm in to be able to go help people and make more money and make money for the company.
That's right.
But ideally, we're not that important.
No. And then the last thing that I'll leave with this note on is to be kinder. Just because you're a leader.
That's a 3-hour show, man.
Right? That really is. It's going to get you a lot further and closer to where you want to be when you can be kind to people and when you recognize and acknowledge what they've done and contributed to help you to get where you are.
Right on.
So that wraps us up for today, E. I can't believe it. This conversation always goes flying by.
Yeah, it was good. It's been a while since we've been here, so it's been fun.
So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And please come back and see us again for more Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk shows. And have a great day. Thank you.
Well, that was actually good. That was easy.
That was easy, right? It's like getting back on the horse again, right?
Yeah.